expressed how and why he felt so angry. It was the first warm day in London that spring, and suddenly the room was completely still. This young man had been coming to the clinic for some time, and was being treated for recurrent depression. I was his psychotherapist, and, over the course of his treatment, we kept indirectly coming back to the topic of sensitivity. But this was the first time that he had openly identified himself as sensitive, and the first time that he had revealed the self-hatred he felt about his sensitivity. It was, for him, a painful but important step in dealing with his sensitive temperament, which he had struggled with since he was a child. For me, it was a key moment in my professional career, because this client had clearly identified something that I had encountered countless times over the years in my work, without, until that moment, having had a name for it, or being able to concretely identify the phenomenon: the highly sensitive man. During my postgraduate training in psychotherapy in Berlin, I kept coming across a particular type of client that I experienced as particularly sensitive, thoughtful, intuitive, conscientious, often introverted, and sometimes shy. These clients came to therapy for the most varied reasons: depression, anxiety, relationship problems. But they all shared an underlying characteristic. They were very sensitive, and, because of this, they experienced their internal and external worlds in a very subtle and perceptive way. After a while, I realized that I particularly enjoyed working with this group of clients precisely because of the way that they perceived and dealt with the world. But it also became increasingly clear to me that it was my male, rather than my female clients, who had the greatest problems with the sensitivity that they described, and who, in therapy, often expressed a desire to be less sensitive. Again and again, I saw the huge amount of psychological suffering caused by the discrepancy between how these men were and how they thought a man should be. They often felt shame and a sense of inferiority about their sensitive disposition, which had been part of their lives since childhood, and they saw their sensitivity as unmanly, feminine, and unattractive. Many had tried, for a long time, to deny their sensitivity, or to hide it from others, nearly always in vain. The conviction that being sensitive meant that you couldn't be manly seemed deeply rooted. During my sessions, I constantly heard male clients saying that they wished they were tougher, more physically and mentally resilient, and that they wished they could learn to be more extroverted in social situations. They usually thought that it was this that would make them more successful in their jobs and more attractive to potential partners. Often these men also wanted to have less conflicted relationships with their own fathers and with other men. Essentially, though, it always came back to the same basic idea. They wanted to be more like what they saw as a typical man, and this typical man was not particularly sensitive. At that time, I hadn't yet come across the concept of high sensitivity as an innate temperamental trait, i.e., a characteristic that you are born with, and wasn't aware of the extensive research done regarding the highly sensitive person, HSP, by the clinical psychologist Elaine Aron, PhD, and her colleagues. She has been researching this concept since the early 1990s, when she began to look into the concept of innate sensitivity in certain people. It was a concept that Carl Jung, the Swedish psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, had described as early as 1913. With my interest piqued by my experiences in London, I began to read more and more about human sensitivity and discovered the concept of sensory processing sensitivity, as high sensitivity is called in academic research. I had the feeling that I had come across a groundbreaking psychological concept that was going to have a huge impact on my work as a therapist. The idea that people are born with different sensitivities that affect the way that they react to the world around them seemed to explain so many things I had seen in my practice. So, over the next few years, I immersed myself in all of the available material on high sensitivity and began a dialogue with Elaine Aron, who gave me an in-depth personal insight into her research.